This 72-year-old woman skipped a 45-minute security line, got escorted to her gate like a VIP, and saved $320 on her flight, all because she knew 3 words the airlines never wanted her to discover. Last month, I watched my own mother pay $200 in unnecessary fees while passengers half her age breezed past using perks she actually qualified for. After that day, I interviewed airline employees, TSA agents, and senior travel advocates. What I found made me angry. Airlines are sitting on a massive amount of unused senior benefits every year. Benefits you already paid for. And it all starts with what happened to Margaret from Phoenix. Benefit 1. Free special assistance. Margaret discovers the secret. Picture this. It's 6 in the morning at Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport. Margaret is 72 years old, and she's done this trip to see her grandkids so many times she could navigate the airport blindfolded. But this September morning was different. She walks in and sees the security line wrapped around like a snake, probably 45 minutes long. Her knees are already aching from the walk from parking. Her carry-on bag feels like someone filled it with bricks. She's standing there, mentally preparing for the torture ahead, when she overhears 2 women talking near check-in. One looks about her age, maybe older. The other one, turns out, is a retired flight attendant. And the retired flight attendant says something that stops Margaret in her tracks. "Honey," she says to her friend, "just go up there and request special assistance. It's free, it's your right, and it'll change how you fly forever." Margaret watches this woman walk up to the counter, say something to the agent, and within 5 minutes, I kid you not, 5 minutes, an airline employee appears with a wheelchair. Those 3 words: request special assistance. Margaret's heart is beating fast because she feels like she's doing something wrong. She walks up to the same counter and says, "Excuse me, I'd like to request special assistance to my gate." The agent smiles. "Of course, ma'am. Would you prefer a wheelchair or just walking assistance?" That was it. No interrogation. No proof needed. No doctor's note. Just a simple request. The airline employee, his name was James, wheeled her straight to the TSA pre-check line. Margaret doesn't have TSA pre-check. She's never paid for it. But wheelchair assistance gets you priority screening automatically. That 45-minute line she was dreading. She bypassed it completely. James wheeled her through security in 3 minutes, helped her with her bags, took her directly to gate B14. When boarding time came, James returned. He wheeled her down the jet bridge before first-class passengers, before the fancy credit card holders, before everyone. The flight attendants helped her with her carry-on. She got settled in her seat while the gate area was still packed with people waiting to board. No stress, no rush, no fighting for overhead bin space. Now here's what makes me angry. This isn't some secret loophole. This is federal law. The Air Carrier Access Act requires airlines to provide this assistance to anyone who requests it. You don't need to be disabled. You just need to ask. And they don't advertise it because it costs them money. But Margaret's assistant James told her something at security that opened her eyes even wider. Benefit 2. TSA Senior Privileges. Officer Rodriguez revelation. So there's Margaret being wheeled up to security by James. The TSA officer, Officer Rodriguez, looks at her ID and does a double take. Not a bad double take, but like he just remembered something important. "Mrs. Henderson," he says. Margaret told me she loved that he called her Mrs. Henderson instead of just barking next. "I see you're 72. Just so you know, when you turn 75, you won't have to take your shoes off anymore. You can leave your light jacket on too. It's our gift to seniors who've been taking their shoes off in security lines for 20 years. Margaret laughed and said, "Well, that's 3 years away, but good to know." But then Officer Rodriguez leaned in like he was sharing a secret. "Between you and me, if you ever have trouble bending down to take off your shoes, or if standing in these lines is hard on you, just let us know. We have something called TSA Cares. You call them 3 days before you fly, and they arrange for someone to meet you and help you through security. It's completely free. He handed her a little card with the number 855-787-2227. My mother uses it, he added. She's 78, has arthritis. They meet her at the curb and stay with her until she's at her gate. She calls at her airport concierge service. James chimed in from behind the wheelchair. That's how it works. The more help you ask for, the more we can give. But if you don't ask, we can't offer. Airline rules. Margaret goes through security, and because she's in a wheelchair, she gets what they call alternative screening. She doesn't have to take her shoes off this time. She doesn't have to stand in the long line. They check her hands for residue, do a quick pat down while she's seated, and she's through in 3 minutes. Later, she told me, I've been flying for 50 years. 50 years. And that was the first time going through security didn't stress me out. All because I asked for help. The thing is, when you're being given wheelchair assistance, you automatically get many of the same benefits that people pay $85 for with TSA pre-check. You get priority screening. You get help with your bags. You get treated like a human being instead of cattle being herded through a gate. And once you hit 75, it gets even better. You keep your shoes on, your jacket on, your belt on. It's automatic. No application needed. Just show your ID and mention your age. Security was a breeze, but you're probably wondering how Margaret saved $320. Well, this is where the story gets really interesting. Benefit 3. THE $320 savings breakdown. Jennifer's check-in counter magic. Let me back up a bit. Before Margaret got the wheelchair, before she met James, she was at the check-in counter. And this is where her savings actually started. The agent, a young woman named Jennifer, was checking Margaret in. Margaret mentioned she had her CPAP machine for sleep apnea, and Jennifer's eyes lit up. "Oh, did you pack that separately?" Jennifer asked. Margaret said no, it was crammed in her carry-on like always. "Let me save you some space," Jennifer said, pulling out a special tag. Medical equipment doesn't count as a carry-on. You can carry your CPAP in its own bag, plus your carry-on, plus your personal item. That's 3 bags you can bring on board, not 2. Margaret was stunned. For years, she'd been cramming her CPAP into her carry-on, leaving no room for anything else, forcing her to check a bag every single time. $70 each way. That's $140 per round trip she'd been paying unnecessarily. But Jennifer wasn't done. "Do you have medication?" Margaret had a whole bag of medications, heart pills, blood pressure, diabetes supplies, you name it. Those can go in a separate medical bag too. Doesn't count against your limit. And here's a tip, anything related to your medical condition can go in that bag. Heating pad for your back, medical. Special cushion for sitting, medical. Even snacks if you're diabetic. Then came the seat situation. Margaret was originally in seat 38B. If you know anything about airplane seats, that's a middle seat, way in the back, basically the worst seat on the plane. She'd actually paid $39 extra to select an aisle seat originally, but they'd changed her aircraft and bumped her to this terrible middle seat. Jennifer looked at her screen, then at Margaret, then back at her screen. "Mrs. Henderson, I see you have medical equipment, and you're 72. Would an aisle seat closer to the front be helpful for you?" "That would be wonderful," Margaret said, "but I already paid for seat selection once, and..." Jennifer cut her off with a smile. "No charge. Accommodation for medical needs." She clicked a few keys. "I've got you in 12C. Aisle seat, much easier for you to get up during the flight if needed." She made the same change for Margaret's return flight. That's $78 in seat selection fees Margaret didn't have to pay. But the biggest savings came later. Margaret's return flight got delayed by weather. She needed to change to a later date to avoid the storm. Normal change fee, $102. But when she called, she mentioned she was a senior with medical equipment who needed to ensure her medications stayed properly stored. The agent paused, then said, "Let me waive that fee as a one-time courtesy for the inconvenience." Add it all up. No more checked bag fees saved her $140. Seat selection fees saved her $78. Change fee waived saved her $102. Total, $320 saved on just this one trip. But money is just money. What happened next at boarding gave Margaret something more valuable, her dignity back. Benefit 4. Priority PRE boarding. The boarding transformation. It's boarding time at Gate B14. Margaret's sitting in her wheelchair near the gate with James. For years, this had been her nightmare moment. Standing in group 4 or 5, watching the overhead bins fill up, her knees screaming from standing so long, getting bumped and pushed as people rushed past her. The gate agent makes the first announcement. "Good morning, folks. We're about to begin boarding for Flight 447 to Denver. We invite any passengers needing extra time or assistance to board at this time." James wheels Margaret forward. There's no line, no crowd, no rush. The gate agent smiles at her. "Good morning, Mrs. Henderson. Take all the time you need." Margaret told me this was the moment she almost cried. She's rolling down the jet bridge while 200 people are still sitting in the gate area. The plane is empty except for the flight crew. The flight attendant at the door doesn't look harried or stressed. She actually has time to help. "Good morning. Let me help you with that bag." James helps her transfer from the wheelchair to her seat 12C, that beautiful aisle seat Jennifer got her. He lifts her carry-on into the overhead bin. He makes sure she has everything she needs within reach. Then he says something that stuck with Margaret. "Mrs. Henderson, you can request this help every time you fly. You don't need a reason beyond wanting assistance. At your age, you've earned it." Margaret sat there in her comfortable aisle seat, watching as first-class passengers boarded after her. Then the credit card priority people. Then the families. Then everyone else. She was sitting there, relaxed, hydrated, medications organized, watching the chaos she used to be part of. The man who eventually sat next to her in 12B looked at her and said, "You must have super status to board that early." Margaret smiled and said, "Something like that." But here's the beautiful truth. She doesn't have status. She doesn't have a special credit card. She just finally learned to ask for what she's legally entitled to. The Air Carrier Access Act says airlines must allow pre-boarding for anyone who self-identifies as needing extra time. At 72, needing extra time is your call to make. Now you might be thinking this sounds too good to be true. So let me tell you what happened when Margaret discovered even more benefits. Benefit 5. Seat Accommodation Strategies. Margaret's upgrade story. Fast forward to Margaret's third trip using these benefits. She's getting confident now, but she's about to learn something new. The flight to Denver is oversold. They're desperately looking for volunteers to take a later flight. Margaret wasn't going to volunteer. She wanted to get to her grandkids. But she overhears the gate agent saying they need to move people around because they'd sold too many exit row seats. Margaret's in her usual 12C aisle seat. She approaches the agent quietly and says, "If it helps, I'm flexible on my seat. I'm a senior with special assistance, so I board early anyway. If you need to move me to accommodate the exit row situation, that's fine." The gate agent's face lit up like Margaret had just solved world hunger. She typed furiously on her computer. "Mrs. Henderson, would you mind terribly if I moved you to 4C? 4C. That's first class. We need your main cabin seat for an exit row qualified passenger, and this is the only seat left on the plane. Would that be acceptable?" Margaret tried not to smile too big. "I suppose I could make that work." She flew to Denver in first class. Free drinks, free meal, hot towels, the whole thing. All because she'd learned to work with the airline instead of against it. All because she spoke up. Now, let me be crystal clear. Airlines are NOT required to give you free upgrades. This doesn't happen every time. But gate agents have something called discretionary receipting authority. They can move passengers around for operational needs, medical accommodations, or to solve problems. When you're polite, flexible, and mention legitimate needs like I'm a senior who needs an aisle seat for bathroom access, or I have arthritis and need to be able to stretch my legs, agents will often try to help. Not with free first class, that was lucky, but with better seats in your cabin. Margaret learned to approach it differently. Instead of demanding, she'd say things like, I'm in 34B, but with my arthritis, an aisle seat would be really helpful if one becomes available. 7 times out of 10, by the time boarding starts, she'd been moved to a better seat. Same cabin, but aisle instead of middle, or closer to the front, or with empty middle seats next to her. But Margaret's biggest discovery was about to come from an unexpected source, her late husband Jack. Benefit 6. Veteran and medical exemptions. The veteran revelation. It's Margaret's 4th trip, and she's checking in with a different agent, an older gentleman named Robert. She's telling him about her CPAP machine like she always does now, when Robert says something that stops Margaret cold. I see here your husband was a veteran. Are you using his benefits? Margaret's heart sank. Jack had served in Vietnam, came home, never talked about it much, built a life, raised their kids. He'd been gone for 3 years now. Margaret didn't think his service mattered for her travel anymore. Ma'am, Robert said gently, did you know you have access to the USO lounge? Margaret didn't even know what that was. Robert explained it's a place for military members and their families to rest. He explained that many USO locations allow military spouses and surviving spouses in. He spent 15 minutes writing down resources and telling her how to check. When Margaret got home, she found Jack's DD-214 in his old filing cabinet. Started carrying a copy when she flew. And while she learned that widows don't automatically get the free bags that active military gets, she did discover something amazing on her next Veterans Day weekend flight. She mentioned to the American Airlines agent that she was a veteran's widow and showed Jack's DD-214. The agent made a phone call, came back and said, "We're waiving your baggage fee today as a thank you for your family's service." $70 saved. But more importantly, Margaret felt like Jack was still taking care of her. She also learned that day about medical equipment exemptions, not just her CPAP, but anything medical. When she started packing her medications in a separate medical bag, she discovered it doesn't count against your carry-on limit. Neither do mobility aids like canes or walkers. One trip, she brought her heating pad for her back, her special seat cushion, her medications, her blood pressure monitor, all in a medical supplies bag that flew free. No questions asked. Robert had opened her eyes. Airlines lose millions every year because people don't claim these exemptions. A CPAP bag doesn't count. A medication bag doesn't count. If it's medical, it flies free. Federal law. But the biggest revelation came when Margaret called her daughter, whose husband is currently serving in the Air Force. Her daughter had no idea that active military families get 5 free bags on most airlines. 5. They'd been paying bag fees for years. One conversation, sparked by Robert's question, saved her daughter's family hundreds of dollars a year and helped Margaret realize that Jack's service still mattered, still protected his family, even after he was gone. Margaret's airport education wasn't complete yet. She was about to discover something that would change how she spent her waiting time. Benefit 7. Airport comfort zones. The USO discovery. One day Margaret's sitting at her usual gate, B14, when she notices an older couple get up and walk toward a door she'd never paid attention to. It said USO Lounge. On her way back from the bathroom, curiosity gets the better of her. She peeks inside. It's like a different world. Comfortable recliners, free snacks, free drinks, people relaxing in peace. Military members in uniform are reading, resting, some even sleeping in actual beds. Next trip, she asks James about it during their wheelchair journey. "Oh, that's for the military," James says. free for anyone who served. Your husband was a veteran, right? You might qualify during certain times. Doesn't hurt to ask. Margaret worked up the courage to knock on the door. A volunteer named Betty answered, sweet woman about Margaret's age. My husband was a veteran, Margaret started, but he passed away. I don't suppose. Betty smiled. Honey, do you have his DD 214? Margaret did. Betty looked at it, looked at Margaret, and her face softened. Jack served in Vietnam? My husband too. Come on in. We have space today. For 2 hours, Margaret sat in comfort. Free coffee, free snacks, clean bathrooms, and Betty to talk to about their husband's service. It wasn't really about the free food. It was about the recognition, the dignity, the acknowledgement that her family's sacrifice still meant something. Betty was honest. Not every USO lounge allows widows. Policies vary by location, but many do, especially when they're not crowded. You just have to ask. But even without lounge access, Margaret discovered something else. Every airport has hidden, quiet spaces. The chapel at Phoenix, always empty, always peaceful. The outdoor garden at Denver that most people rush past. The rocking chairs at Charlotte that everyone ignores because they're hunting for outlets. I used to sit at the gate, fighting for a seat, stressed by all the noise and crowds, Margaret told me. Now I find the quiet spots. Every airport has them. You just have to look. She doesn't need a $59 day pass to the airline lounge. She needs peace, a clean bathroom, and a place to take her medications quietly. And those places exist for free in every airport. All these benefits work great when everything goes smoothly. But what happens when flights get canceled? That's when knowing the system really pays off. Benefit 8. Disruption Advantages. The Christmas Miracle. December 23rd. Margaret's at Phoenix Airport, heading to Denver for Christmas with the grandkids. She gets to the gate and sees the one word nobody wants to see. Canceled. Massive snowstorm in Denver. Every flight canceled. The gate area looks like a disaster zone. People sleeping on the floor, lines wrapped around the terminal, grown adults in tears. Old Margaret would have panicked, would have stood in that line for hours, would have missed Christmas. But new Margaret knows the system. She doesn't get in line. She takes out her phone and calls American Airlines directly. While she's on hold, she opens the app and starts looking for alternatives. When she gets through, she doesn't just say her flight was canceled. She says, I'm a 72-year-old traveler with medical equipment and medications that need refrigeration. My flight to Denver was canceled. What are my options? The agent puts her on hold, comes back. Mrs. Henderson, I can get you on a United flight that leaves in 3 hours. It's the last seat. Would that work? While everyone else is still standing in line, Margaret's already rebooked. But she's not done. I understand weather isn't your fault, but as a senior traveler with medical needs, are there any accommodations available for the wait? Another hold. Mrs. Henderson, I'm adding 2 meal vouchers to your record and a one-time pass to our Admirals Club so you have somewhere comfortable to wait. $59 lounge access, free. $30 in meal vouchers. All because she asked nicely and mentioned her actual medical needs. Margaret spends 3 hours in the Admirals Club. Free drinks, free snacks, comfortable chairs, clean bathrooms, charging stations, and most importantly, gate agents who help her monitor her new flight. When it's time to board the United flight, they even call ahead to ensure she gets pre-boarding on an airline she doesn't usually fly. Meanwhile, that crowd at the gate, still waiting in line, still trying to get rebooked, still sitting on the floor. The difference? Margaret knew to call instead of wait, knew to mention her age and medical needs, knew to ask for accommodations even when they seemed unlikely, and knew to be polite to agents who were dealing with hundreds of angry passengers. I made it to Christmas, Margaret told me. Half the people on my original flight didn't, all because I knew how to work the system. Margaret's learned so much, but there were still 3 more discoveries that would save her even more money and stress. Benefits 9, 10, and 11. THE Final Discoveries. Margaret's Last Lessons. Over coffee last week, Margaret told me about 3 final things she wished she'd known years ago. First, the medicine rules. Margaret's diabetic, travels with insulin that needs to stay cold. For years, she bought expensive travel coolers, worried about ice packs, stressed about keeping it cold enough. Then she learned that medical ice packs are completely exempt from the liquid rules. She can bring frozen ice packs through security if they're for medication. The TSA agent might test them, but they're allowed. Even better, she discovered she can bring as much medication as she wants in her carry-on. Not just a week's worth, as much as she wants. One time, traveling for a month to stay with her daughter, she brought all her medications rather than risk losing them in checked luggage. All legal, all allowed. Second, the Real ID situation almost caught her. Starting May 7, 2025, you need a Real ID or passport to fly domestically. Margaret had an old driver's license. The DMV website showed a 4-month wait for appointments. She was panicking until her neighbor mentioned that many DMVs have senior-only hours. Margaret called, mentioned she was 72 and needed a Real ID for medical travel. They got her in the next week during senior hours, special appointment times just for people over 65. In and out in 30 minutes instead of hours waiting with everyone else. Third, and this one really hurt to learn, Margaret discovered that every airport in America has free assistance services beyond just wheelchairs. If you're lost, confused, need help finding your gate, can't read the monitors, need someone to walk with you, just go to any information desk and ask. It's free. It's required by law. I spent years getting lost in Denver's huge airport, Margaret said, shaking her head. Missing connections because I couldn't find my gate fast enough. Stressed and confused. And help was available the whole time. I just thought asking meant I was weak. Now I realize it means I'm smart. Margaret's complete transformation. The full circle. Let me tell you who Margaret is today versus who she was 1 year ago. A year ago, Margaret would arrive at the airport 3 hours early, stressed about everything. She'd pay whatever fees they asked because she didn't know she had options. She'd struggle through security, fight for overhead space, sit in whatever terrible seat they gave her, and arrive at her destination exhausted. Flying meant pain, stress, and expense. Today, Margaret arrives 90 minutes before her flight, completely calm. She knows James or another assistant will meet her. She knows she'll sail through security. She knows she'll board first, sit in a decent seat, and arrive rested. She's saved over $2,000 this year alone. But more importantly, she's gotten her dignity back. The woman who once dreaded flying now teaches airport navigation at her senior center. She's become the travel expert her friends call before they fly. She keeps a little notebook with all the tips and phone numbers to share. But here's what Margaret wants everyone to understand. She told me to make sure I included this. You don't have to do everything at once. Start with just one thing. Next time you fly, just request special assistance. Just that one thing. See how it changes your experience. Then try another benefit the time after that. Build your confidence step by step. She's right. These benefits exist because legislators and advocates fought for them, recognizing that older travelers deserve dignity and accommodation. Every time you don't use them, you're subsidizing the airlines. You're paying for services you're entitled to but not using. Margaret flies 6 times a year now to see those grandkids, sometimes more. Each trip gets easier because she knows the system. She knows her rights. And most importantly, she knows that asking for help isn't weakness, it's wisdom. For 50 years, I flew the hard way, Margaret says. I thought that's just how it was. I thought getting older meant accepting discomfort. But these benefits exist specifically because the aviation industry recognizes that older travelers need and deserve extra help. Using them isn't taking advantage. It's taking what's yours. The three words that started everything: request special assistance. Those three words led Margaret to discover TSA shortcuts, baggage exemptions, priority boarding, seat accommodations, veteran benefits, quiet spaces, and crisis management strategies that transformed her travel experience. Your age isn't something to hide from. When you know your rights, it becomes your passport to better treatment. Start tomorrow. Start with one benefit. Start with requesting special assistance. Watch how everything changes, because you've already paid for these benefits through decades of travel, taxes, and putting up with the aviation industry's evolution. Now it's time for them to give something back. Margaret's final words to me were simple: "I wish I'd known all this when Jack was alive. We could have traveled together with dignity." Don't wait. Start using these benefits now. You've earned every single one. If this story opened your eyes to benefits you didn't know existed, share it with every senior you know. Comment below which benefit surprised you most, or share your own airport story. Remember, Margaret was just like you until she learned three words: request special assistance. Your age is your advantage. You just have to know how to use it. Safe travels.